Hello, this is Eric and welcome to the second part of this crash course in Blender for absolute beginners. In this part I'm going to introduce you to the 3D viewport, to the 3D cursor, and also how to select objects. But the first thing I want to do is actually to recommend, highly recommend even, and that is that you use a keyboard with a numpad. In Blender, these numpad digits or numbers, they have actually special function in addition to the keys above, the 1, 2, 3s that you have on top of the keyboard over here. So you need a keyboard with a numpad. That will help you immensely. And the second thing I really recommend is to have a mouse with a scroll wheel, where the scroll wheel can work as a third mouse button, a middle mouse button. And this will also be very helpful in the 3D view. So let's get started. Now when you start Blender for the first time, it loads what is called a startup scene or a startup file. And the startup file contains this default cube, a camera, and up here you have a lamp. Now the first thing you usually do when you get into a new application is that you start left clicking around and trying to move stuff, but you can see whenever I left click I only move this funny cursor around, and that's called a 3D cursor. So by left clicking you actually place the 3D cursor in your scene somewhere, and that's not very helpful, especially not at this stage, because we're not interested in a 3D cursor at this point. Now in order to select stuff, for instance if I want to select this lamp here, I will right click. I'll right click the lamp, or I'll right click the camera, or I'll right click the cube, and that's how I select stuff. Now as this is a 3D program, I expect to be able to look at my objects from different angles inside the 3D view. And this is where a mouse with the scroll wheel that can act as a middle mouse button comes in handy. To zoom in you just scroll up, and to zoom out you just scroll down. And to rotate you press the middle mouse button and move your mouse around to rotate the 3D view to look at your object from different angles. Now to illustrate the next point, I've actually prepared a material for this default cube. As you can see, the material highlights what side of the default cube that we're looking at. When modeling, it's quite important to be able to look at objects from straight angles, and by using the numpad keys you can easily get these straight angles. So by pressing one key on your numpad you'll see the front of the cube. If you press 3 on your numpad you will see the right hand side, and if you press 7 you will see the top side. Now if you want the reverse, if you want to see the bottom side, you simply hold down the control key by pressing 7 and you'll get the bottom. Hold down the control key and press 1 to get the back side, and hold down the control key and press 3 to get the left side. Another key that is really important is number 5 on the numpad. By pressing it, it switches on and off perspective. In this case we're in orthogonal view, and pressing 5 again we go back to perspective view. Perspective view is really what we expect from reality, where things closer to us are larger than things far away. But sometimes that's not very helpful, especially when we're trying to model things. For instance, if we're looking at the front view of this default cube and we look at it in wireframe mode, it's really hard for us to say if this corner is aligned with this corner when looking from the side. But if we look at it in orthogonal view, we can see that these sides are aligned. Okay, so now this is pretty good. As long as we only have the default cube, it's always in the center, which is great, and we can always take a look at the default cube. However, what if I want to take a closer look at the camera? It's kind of difficult because it keeps moving around. You can see that the default cube is always centered. Now, how can I center another object? I want to select it, but no, that doesn't help. The pivot point isn't changed to the camera. But if you press the comma on the numpad, boom, and the pivot point is changed to the camera location. So now we can take a closer look at the camera. And the numpad keys work as usual from the top, from the front, and from the right. And I right click my default cube again, press comma on the numpad, and I'm back to having the pivot point for the 3D view to the default cube. Now the last thing I want to show you is how to pan. If you remember, when you press down the middle mouse button and move your mouse around, you rotate the 3D view and you can see your object from different angles. But if you first press down Shift, then your middle mouse button, and then drag, you see that you pan. You can pan. That's not the same thing. You don't change your angle. You always look at it from the same side. So what we're really doing is changing the pivot point of the rotation. So if I want to take a closer look at this, let's say this O in front, I can move in, zoom in, and then Shift, pan into place, rotate, pan into place, zoom in, pan into place. And by using pan, you can change the pivot point for the rotation. So now when I rotate, I have the O more or less in the middle all the time. Okay, I think that's enough for part 2. In the next part, I will show you how to move or grab objects. Thanks for watching. See you soon.